on.
Thank you for that.
Sorry. You can, I just wanted to hear your voice again, John.
But we don't leave this audio on, do we?
That's 1, 2, 3.
We can pause this one, right?
Well, I'm just checking if the stream's working.
So you're live on YouTube right now, so you may wanna.
Test.
Welcome to the March 11th, 2025 ETAC meeting. All right, let's start over again. Welcome to the March 11th, 2025 ETAC meeting. Recording secretary in the meeting recording secretary. Has the meeting being recorded?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Mark McLaughlin. I'm chair of the Environmental and Transportation Advisory Commission. I would like to call this ETAC meeting of March 11th, 2025 to order at 4:05 p.m. We have 5 items on the agenda. Recording secretary, please call roll and advise any commissioners will to request a excused absence or a remote participation due to invoking the emergency provision physical absence.
No commissioners are requesting an excused absence.
Okay, recording secretary, please call roll.
Chair McLaughlin,
Aye.
Commissioner Klein,
Here.
Commissioner Baeza,
Here.
Commissioner Viduri, Commissioner Cheney,
Here.
Commissioner Alvarado.
Present.
Quorum has been made.
Thank you. Next, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. Leo, would you please lead us now?
Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Larry. Okay, recording secretary, please describe the way the public can access this virtual meeting.
This meeting is being live streamed on the City of Santa Ana portal, www.santa-ana.primegov.com/public/portal. If anyone would like to provide a public comment, they may do so in person or on the City of Santa Ana portal, www.santa-ana.primegov.com/public/portal. The opportunity to speak is going to follow the next comment. If you wish to speak, please select the Zoom hand icon to let us know you would like to speak. You will be called upon by the name you entered. If any members of the public are present at this in-person meeting, please be sure you have completed a speaker card and then hand it to me. You will have 3 minutes to speak. We will alert you when your time is up.
Anything from the public? Okay, moving on to the public comments on the agenda items or non-agenda items. Recording secretary, does anybody wish to speak?
There are no members of the public that wish to provide a public comment.
Okay, at this time, we are ready to vote on the consent calendar. Is there a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar, item 1 through 4?
A motion.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second.
Commissioner Alvarado has made a motion to approve consent calendar items 1 through 4, and Commissioner Cheney has seconded the motion. Call. Chair McLaughlin,
Aye.
Commissioner Klein,
Aye.
Commissioner Baeza,
Aye.
Commissioner Viduri, Commissioner Cheney,
Aye.
Commissioner Alvarado.
Yes.
The motion to approve consent calendar items 1 through 4 passed by a vote of 5-0 with Commissioner Viduri absent.
Okay. Moving on to the business calendar, item number 5, citywide parking study. Francisco?
Thank you, Chair. At this point, I would like to introduce Francisco Orellana that will present this item, citywide parking study. I know staff has been hard at work with a consultant on this study. It's been in the motion for, I would say, 9 to maybe a year. So this is the result of our work so far, and Frank will provide you with the update.
Good afternoon, ETAC members, commissioners. I am a little sore throat going, but I think with the mic, you'll be able to hear me well and everything like that. I'm here to catch you up on our first phase of actual studies that we've been doing for permit parking. As you're aware, or most of you are aware of, that we're doing a study to revamp the permit parking program that's roughly about 32 years old. Council has directed us to be able to include everyone. And what I mean by everyone, all multifamilies, single families, everyone in the city into this permit parking program. Obviously, it's an undertaking that, as simple as it sounds, is taking into account every aspect that we have as a city, our partners, schools, the businesses, as well as our own assets like parks, to be able to open up the inventory for the amount of parked cars that we might need to be, or the amount of cars that we may need to park. So this study was basically, what came out of this was the first phase included what the council members wanted to see, and also what the residents saw and through their survey. And then we compiled it together to basically show what everybody's requesting, what everybody's saying and wants, and how that reflects in the actual responses that we have. So if I may take you to the third page, Dixon is our consultant that's helping us along with this. They're bringing an outside resource that obviously we don't have that connection with, outside resource that we don't have with ourselves here. But the majority of these items are brought together by staff, obviously council, members of the community that are helping us guide us which way we want to go in this. So the experience they have is extensive, and they're being very helpful in pointing out things that other cities are doing. Now, we're not following what other cities are doing, by no means, but it's good to know a reference point. If we're going to go too far, let's say, in one direction, what's happened in other cities that have tried that. So that way we don't waste our time, be more efficient with our time to be able to get the product out as quickly as we can. So on the next page, here's where we're at right now. We're roughly in the second round, but we're going to take a step back. Here, we'll show the recommendations of the top 3 recommendations roughly that came out of the survey. This survey was done in person. Either you can do it on paper, online, through QR codes, through our website. So it was a lot of different ways that we reached out to the community with that. So I'm pretty sure you're familiar with it, but so we have about 27 permit parking districts in the city. They're represented on that map right there. So all these were set up by resolution. None of these were city driven. These were all neighborhood / multiple neighborhood driven areas. So some neighborhoods are within that district. So like, let's say Washington Square, the neighborhood itself is the district itself. Other districts are 2 or 3 other neighborhoods combined to make one big district. Some districts bifurcate neighborhoods. But I mean, this occurred, like I said, roughly over the last 32 years. They're color coordinated just so we can make, and if you have permit parking, you'll realize the color coordination here is the same thing as your permit. So everybody who, let's say, wants to park on the blue side here can't do it over in a salmon or a red area or anything like that. So those neighborhoods are exclusive to themselves. So, now we did a very, I don't know, I like to have fun with this. So that was how we gathered data. So that hand is holding a phone that we read license plates. So we went around the city in different locations, as you see the current on the left side, these neighborhoods and districts, as well as the ones that are coming up in the second phase. We went and read license plates. Before anybody's alarms go off, we only read the license plate and geocoded them to the location that we were parked at. The reason for that is to see if there's abuse of the 72-hour rule, if there's abuse of the same car sitting there not moving at all, even if it's getting tickets through street sweeping. So we were trying to achieve, one, an inventory, and two, what density is actually using the street right now. We don't know who the car belongs to or anything like that. We just know that that license plate's been found here, 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 or in that same spot over and over and over again. So we can analyze more apples to apples. When you ask us, well, how much spaces are out there? It might look full, but it might be the same 50 cars that are out there roughly every week. So that's why we did this. So, and you can tell on the next slide. Okay, so this, I might have a different one, sorry. Anyways, so this represents the total cars, total respondents from everyone throughout the city. Now, the number is roughly 4,000. Actually, it was a lot higher than that, but people commented on our survey 3 or 4 or 5 different times. So if they were the same person and the comment was the same, we wouldn't include it in there. So it wouldn't skew the results of the survey. But if their comment was different, let's say it was a different, for whatever reason, totally different than their first comment, it was included on here. So, and you can see the breakdown. The more curious part is the average of cars is 3 cars per 3 drivers per household. We weren't expecting that necessarily, that number, even though it sounds like it's perfect average, we weren't expecting a number. We were actually expecting higher, especially because of the density we have in the city and the amount of cars and everything we have. Next one. So these you're going to see are, without, adding too much to this, you obviously know the peak hours are overnight, right? Obviously there's around 53% of it that's overnight. That's the peak hours anywhere in the city and everything like that. So this is also not specific to, the data is not specific only to non-permit parking. This is specific to the whole city, to where we did the survey, permit parking or non-permit parking. So that way you can just frame the bar graph that you see here. Next one. So this is one of the more interesting ones as far as breaking down what, we get a lot of complaints of people walking to spaces. Again, this has to do with both non-permit parking areas and permit parking areas, how far people are willing to walk for parking, and what they do. Which for us, we thought it was going to be a little bit higher in the farther away blocks, and it was not, at least from the respondents that we had and everything here. That's not to say that's not what's occurring out there. Still, it might be that people are doing this from a longer distance. They may not be the ones responding totally here. So the reason I bring this up is because when we do the study, it's going to, and we do the recommendations and everything, as we go through it, we're going to be breaking it down to the granular level on not just by district, but by type of, like the type of person that's parking out there, if they're involved with or without a district. So that way we can put something together a little bit more precise to what council wants and how do we open up parking. All right, next one. All right, so I'm pretty sure we all know this, not a surprise. Enforcement is the #1 problem with the permit parking program. So the effectiveness of enforcement, how often they call for enforcement and everything, has a lot to do with people's complaints and everything like that. Permit parking is considered very low on the priority list, and we understand that. What we try to do is help PD focus their enforcement. When people call us about enforcement, we try to tell them, these are the hours they're complaining about. Instead of telling them it's overnight, it's 3 or 4 in the morning. Trying to get that focus down to help PD get out there and everything like that. So by doing this data, the density of the problem with enforcement is large for permit parking. So one of the things that our Councilmember Fan asked us to do is to investigate if permit parking can be enforced by Public Works. So we are investigating that. We are actually moving pretty quickly towards how we can possibly do that. And I'll share that in more slides as it comes up and everything like that. Cost, that's a very heavy issue to talk about because we get a lot of different requests on cost. Why can't we do it prorated? Why can't we do it a tiered level cost? From the respondents here, cost didn't seem to be an issue, but overall, we know it is. We get a lot of requests and everything. People didn't fill out these as far as what type of costs are they looking at? Are we looking at tiered cost? Are we looking, I'll reference low income costs. All these different costs and everything like that have come up, and we are exploring those, even though they didn't make a big impact on the data that we have before you right now. So yeah, another fun one is the guest passes. If you already live in a permit parking street, you know that if it's a 24/7 permit parking street, guest passes go by like that. I mean, it doesn't last you the whole year. 12 to 6, it's a lot easier to manage your parties and everything else like that. We got respondents here saying that, as you can tell, it's sufficient. Other people want them doubled, tripled. Obviously, linear space out in the street makes a big difference what we can or can't do with guest passes and everything like that. Outside the permits themselves, the quantity of permits, this is the other big ticket item that people want to see grown. And we have to, and that's why we're doing the density on these surveys to see how much space we have. If we can grow and have more guest passes for people out there. But yeah, this was one of the bigger ones that we have received a lot of comments on everything. All right, with that said, some recommendations categories came out of the survey. We're not holding ourselves exactly to these only, but these are to be responded to based on the first phase of our survey. Each one has, as we go forward, you'll see like the top 2 or top 3 recommendations or requests that they want us to continue to study. That doesn't mean everything that's been considered is off the table, because they're a combination of items. So if somebody says, yeah, I want more parking in my area, well, how can I give you more parking if I don't have street parking? But if I can use the school parking, business parking, our own parks parking, maybe modify our own streets if possible to allow on-street parking specifically for the multifamilies that we're trying to include on this. And one thing I want to frame here real quick, because I know people like to argue with, it's my area of parking. Well, because of people intruding into their neighborhoods, they're like, I don't know who that person is. This program means to frame that everyone who's parking around you or near you is your neighbor and will be your neighbor, because that's how it's going to be set up. So if intrusion does come in, it won't be from the neighbor, from a multifamily down the street. It'll be actually your neighbor around the block, whatever it may be. But it won't be an intrusion from someone coming out, let's say, another city, or somebody coming to, I'll use this example real quick. They pick up people that are working for them, drop off their cars, and then leave. So it'll be actually your own residence within that area itself. So go ahead. Okay, so yeah, we talked about a little bit about the multifamilies included. We're estimating right now the first year alone potentially of 40,000 new permits being issued to the properties that don't qualify now. So what I mean by that is our current program is 4 units and below, fourplex, triplex, duplex, single family residences. Council's asked us to open it up to everyone in the city, which includes 5 units and higher. So that was just a top estimate that we got out of here. We extrapolated the numbers based on the densities that we had in the survey, and we were estimating around 40,000. That's not to say that's going to happen, and we're not going to tell you it's going to happen overnight. This will be a gradual growth. The logistics of growing the program, it has to be gradual. Some areas of the 27 districts you saw might not get touched at all because there's no influences. Other areas, Pacific Park, formerly East Side, will have huge influences because they have a lot of multifamilies there already. And we'll get into, based on your questions, we'll get into some of the nitty gritty stuff of what planning, being forced to do by the state, the 0.7 parking standards, the ADUs, the garage conversions, all those we can't touch and add more parking to. So we have to actually find parking for them as well, because as these developments go in, they blow out our streets and more permit parking is being requested. Go back just real quick. So touched a little bit on the pricing, the escalating rate structure. We're working on that. And what that basically means, people want, tiered effect, lower income, it's higher. We haven't been able to touch it to an index at this point, and we don't want to. We want to keep it open. There's been some suggestions with different type of indices, but we haven't settled on one to say this is what we're going to follow. Because of the way each district works differently, we may or may not apply one index to each area, or even a density for that matter right now. I'll use Anaheim as an example, where they say any unit, 40-unit building, single-family home, 1 2 bedrooms, 1 permit, 2 3 bedrooms, 2 permits, 4 and above, 3 permits. That's it. So that's just one density ratio. We're not using that. We're using that as an example to see how that affects us in areas. We're also using the Costa Mesa sample, where 1 permit per person that can drive in household without any constraining regulations. You can move in 10 people, you'd have 10 cars all of a sudden. Obviously, we're not going to do that. So, but you can see we're turning over every rock that we can to make sure we're responsive to every question that comes up for the permit parking program. Some of the more curious ones that come up recently was the continuous 4-block phases. This is what people are referencing, like the domino effect that everybody calls it in permit parking. This street falls, and then 6, 7, 8 months, 10 months later, this street falls, and it's that gradual effect that keeps growing. Some people suggested, why don't we do 4 blocks at a time? Okay, so we're looking at that as well. Each block has to sustain itself. We can't have a 50%, which is also on the table. Council asks us to look at, right now it's 67% per street to get permit parking. Council is looking at us to, what would happen if we go 50 plus 1? So obviously it'll grow the program quicker, but we're looking at all those to see what logistics are those and everything. Yeah, the nominal fees and everything like that, that's still being considered. We're looking at rate structures and everything. Nothing's been formally, that's why we didn't put anything formal here for you. So let's go to the next one. This is where the more exciting stuff for us has been happening. Some of the recommendations were do virtual permits. We already are working on that. So, and what we mean by virtual permits is basically license plate readers. So we'll read the license plate and everything. If you're part of the district, that's fine. If you're not, you get a citation. And that goes back to what we're doing as we've been requested to possibly be doing the enforcement ourselves. So we're going to be moving to the online management system right now because of COVID. Roughly around 45% of our current permit holders mail things in now. They don't come in, they don't come to the counter or anything like that. So the new virtual system will allow them to set up their own account, scan their things in, and it'll have a direct tie to the DMV. So in real time, we'll be able to check their registration. And if it's valid, they can proceed. If it's not, they'll be told to update everything like that. Same thing with the license plates. With the driver's license. It'll be something where it's in real time checked. If it's all valid, we keep moving forward. Or they can move forward on it, anything like that. Yeah, some of the other ones has been, instead of having a 2-year cycle that we have now, go to a 1-year cycle. So we're working on that as well to see how that works for every one of the districts. Some districts on a given month will be anywhere between 1,300 to 1,500 permits that are coming in. Right now we have around 10,000 permits for the program and everything like that. So if we go yearly, that'll be something that occurs a little bit too often, but if we go virtual with it, it might be something that's manageable. And that's what we're looking into as well, especially with the growth of the amount of permits that are going to come in. Virtual is the best way to go through that. 50-cent permit purchase. That one's very specific to areas where we have possibly 300 permits available to all the homes there. And they only go in and purchase 100. Well, the program's not intended to exclude people out. We're not trying to make exclusive communities. We're not gated communities to keep everybody out, right? So one of the proposals is if they don't buy at least 50% of their permits for the community, then they don't get permit parking. So we're looking and weighing at that, which is a good idea. But what that good idea means at this point, we haven't applied it to all the other districts. It's very specific to the Northeast district right now. Now, the parking benefit fund that came up with people saying if there's extra money that goes in the program, we can put it back into the community. That one's a bigger task issue because it depends on how many permits are bought per district and how much money we're saving on there based on the cost, city cost and everything like that. Some districts have more permits than others. We don't want to lump sum that benefit. It'll be given to that district itself. At least that's one of the considerations right now. We could lump sum it and get percentages, but we haven't made a full determination on how we're going to proceed with that one. Okay. Of course, if we're going to be doing a lot of the enforcement, everything, this is just about staffing. I already mentioned the license plate, and then the hotspot violations. One thing we're doing right now is to see if cars are actually in the district itself. We have a database already for permit parking. We just compare the list and say how many people are actually part of that district. And the numbers are a little bit higher than we anticipated on that number because they were coming in around 10%. Those cars don't even belong in that district or even in that area. So they're outside influences and everything like that. So we're trying to see how we can refine the hotspot, not necessarily because we want to hit people for violations. That's not our intent. Our intent is to reduce the problem that people say, I'm buying something and no one's coming out to enforce it. No one's doing anything, and there's dissatisfaction with that part of it and everything like that. We want to be responsive to be able to keep the clear street so everybody can use it that belongs on that street. So, is that it? So this is where we're at right now. We procured 2 of these license plate readers that you see on the car right there. So before, when I was showing you that picture of a handout there with the cell phone reading license plate, we were doing around a 4-mile-an-hour clip sometimes, or we'd stop to take the reading and everything. At best, we were getting somewhere around 200 cars a night or during the time that we're doing the study. So it would take about an hour and a half to do that. With the license plate readers, we've been testing it and we're running around 25 miles an hour and doing about 200 cars in less than 15 minutes. So this will open up that, not just for us to study, but it opens up the hotspot situation where we can study it better. It also opens up a lot of variety of things that we'll do that we're going to be presenting more of is when a development that goes in. All right, so we'll talk about the Lion Street development. Everybody's pretty familiar with that one. We can do a study before development goes in real time. After it goes in, we can show the hot spots to that. So say, okay, well, this development now is influencing this. One of the reasons for that is so we can take it forward to council and say, yes, we know that the state says 0.7 in parking. Why can't we do something outside of that? Are we violating any codes, rules, or laws that says, hey, we're going to set up, and this is just an idea that's come up, a 5-story parking structure at the zoo? Who pays for that? Do the developers pay into it as a neighborhood benefit fund or whatever it may be? Because every single development, every single one has blown out the streets by it. Everyone's requesting permit parking, Lacey's Crossings, and everything. And we'll bring a lot of the next phase, case studies that we're doing right now. We're doing case studies up by Morrison Park. We're doing here over the Lacey's Crossings by Garfield and 3rd and 2nd Street and Warren Street. We're doing case studies, pilot studies to show how the introduced permit parking, how that affects that development, how doesn't it affect development, how does it affect areas in general around there. So we'll be presenting those when we have more data on those as well. I mentioned earlier the shared parking agreements with schools, our own parks, businesses. So we've been reaching out to them and everything. On the business side, there's been a little light. So if you guys have any business people that we can talk to that would even be considering us and everything like this, please let us know. We've canvassed a lot of them and everything everywhere in the city, in the downtown, strip areas, bigger parking lots that are just sit there and do nothing overnight near some of the more impacted areas. I have not got a good response out of them yet. Now, this you're probably aware of. These are the lifts, well-protected lifts. These lifts right here on the bottom actually have solar panels on top. So we're using the Cadillac version of it. If you guys know the El Sol apartments, they have none of the structure around it, just the lifts themselves. One of the things we're trying to do is create a net zero equation on this. So if you live in a multifamily, say 120 units, and you want to park in the actual streets, we're going to ask you, what can you do on site to alleviate the problem that's going to occur out there? It shouldn't be you get your piece and then you go out there and grab that. Technically, street parking is for guests. It's always been intended that way since streets started back in the day. That's why you have a 2-car garage. Some people have more or less, and the two-car apron right before that. So they have to do their part too. One of the things we're considering is how do we work with them to get lifts? So if they have already 20 spaces, 40, whatever, they double them. So that we said. Now, obviously, you're going to say, Frank, a lot of these places got carports. Correct. So we might not be able to do that. We're not trying to hurt anybody's property. We're just trying to take advantage of what might be on there. And then we have other things that we're going on that we're looking into that where the city might be able to help out and have like shared use agreements, lease agreements over certain properties that we have. But those are just being vetted out as like potential, not necessarily something we have to move forward on or anything at this time. Last one, I think. Okay, so this came up mostly, strategy F came up mostly in the areas where you have physical meters in place, right? So what happens with the physical meter in place? To be a valid meter location has to have what we call the L's and T's, the tick marks that are painted on the street. That way PD can enforce them and everything like that. Obviously, these spaces are a certain distance apart and they take up more parking. So for every 2 spaces we put in, we lose a half a space of a car. So by putting these in, it removes that criteria, but you still have to pay to play or park in that area. So you can fit more vehicles this way. We haven't fully vetted this one out based on what it means to the different departments that run the permit parking program. I mean, the meter program, sorry. So that belongs to a different department, and we're in conversations with them about how this will help them, if at all, to run the meter program they have and converting it to this. It's just something that was recommended that wasn't originally on our plate to do so. The street turnover, the 24-hour limit congested areas, a lot of the places we have where we already have like we call recycling signs, or if there's permit parking, it recycles. So the 24-hour limit isn't really, I think they were trying to ask us to do something about 72 hours. How we can break up the 72 hours in permitted or non-permit areas. Permitted areas, it's straight up 72 hours. Non-permit areas, we can do recycling of signs and everything like that to help out, bring, literally to what it means, recycle the parking so people leave and other people can come in and stuff like that. Oversized vehicle violations, that was thrown in there because a lot of people in certain areas are seeing an intrusion of RVs. We already have a program for that. That's not something in the purview of permit parking that we're moving forward. There is a permit program for that. Like if you want to load and unload your RV, we give you up to 3 permits. You're choosing 1, 2, 3 days to do that overnight when you load, and up to 3 when you unload when you come back from your trip. That's already part of the program. It's not really going to be addressed here too much other than, we heard everybody what they're talking about, but we have already a program in place for that. Parking, space markings, we talked a little bit about that. People like to see the tick marks and everything. we can't really play tick marks because we lose spaces, but above that, they're not enforceable. Without a meter, the tick marks you put out there are not enforceable, so they lose their effectiveness really quick. And people park over them and everything like that. So, and the reason for the markings that people have came up with is that people reserve parking in a lot of areas. So they'll put 2 cars where 3 cars can fit, wait for their family member, friend to come in, and then they move forward and move around and whatever they do to fit the car. We've come up with different things to attack them. They will be addressed here. A simple one is if there's 2 driveways and somebody's taking the space where 2 cars can fit, we do a small red curb so they can't sit on top of the red curb. They have to move. So, and that's citable. Could be a 2-foot, 3-foot curb, and that's citable. We're already working with that already, and it's shown really good results and everything like that. It makes it easier for PD to cite. But that's where the curb markings came from, and you'll hear a lot of people, well, yeah, PD should be able to cite. They can't unless there's a meter associated with it. And of course, the multinodal part is in reference to the ADUs and everything, because right now, if you're within a half a mile of your home and you build an ADU, we can't ask you to add more parking. So, and same thing with a garage conversion. We can't ask you to add more parking. So what we tell people right now is like, you can't get extra permits in your permit area. Just, you're going to have to use the bus stop that's half a mile away. It's just for now, it's the only excuse we have to give them. One of the things we are asking our teams down here is to let people know before they build a U or do a conversion that it could affect their permit status, whatever that may be. If it's single family to duplex, triplex, if you get to a 4-plex in 5 units, right now with the program we have, it gets kicked out. So, but yeah, so that's what basically what we're getting into, the different modes of turn. How do we, we got our new little train that's going to be going up and down here and everything. Hopefully that'll help a little bit, but I don't know how far reaching that is with the permit parking program at all. So if you do have questions, I know we covered something real quick because this, and we're going to probably get into some really good questions. The QR code is right there at the back of this thing. Please send us an email, ask us questions and everything. We'll be responsive to whatever we have, and even parts of that you might have said on the study and have asked about, and we may have not addressed it in this presentation or anything like that. So for that, I'll open it up to you for questions. And
thank you, Commissioner Alvarado. I have a ton of questions. I'll come after. I have different angles to come at it. So, first one, regarding the collecting of fees and being able to administer this program, is Public Works looking, or the city looking at it to be self-sustained? So the monies that come in are going to be used for that program specifically, or is it going to be dumped into general funds? And then, we're going to be asking city council for us to fund that program moving forward. Like, has that been any thought?
So our intent is to be a self-funded program. Again, and that's with the big caveat, council can do whatever they want. I can't stop them from that. We can't stop them from that. But definitely we're looking to make it self-funding. And which it makes it fair for everybody that way and everything like that. So that is the intent right now, and that's what we're moving forward with.
Okay, and so then I'm assuming that the cost, you said you don't have a basis for the cost. I'm assuming that's will be the basis of the cost, is going to be
Correct.
To maintain it self-sufficient, self-maintained, right?
Correct. So, and that'll be a combination of not just the growth of the permits for the program that we mentioned earlier. Again, we extrapolate around 40,000 permits, but also if we do take over the citation for permit parking, that whatever that number ends up being would be part of the budget for the team.
Got it. Thank you so much for answering that. Enforcement and infractions. One of the complaints that I hear a lot from residents is if they get a citation for parking, let's say they didn't come back to the vehicle 15 minutes after it, right? They're also going to get a parking ticket. They're also going to get a ticket for not having a front license plate and having tinted windows. And so there's additional stuff that seems very petty to residents. Yeah. And so I don't know if that's being addressed in this, and are we going to try to, I would say, avoid that.
It will not be addressed here. We're going to only enforce the permit parking aspect of it. If the vehicle doesn't have lights or windows or whatever, that's not our purview. Our purview is to make sure that if a car doesn't belong there, it gets cited. That's it. And there's no reporting back. And what we're trying to do is have a self-sustaining system where it doesn't report. And this is what, a lot of people counsel also. Will this report back to PD? It won't. That's what we're trying to do right now. See, okay, what was that cost us to do for it just to go straight through on our own system? We have our own, let's say, hearing officers and everything else like that. What is that cost going to be at the end of the day that doesn't tie us to PD and everything like that? Like, even for now, the license plate readers, we've been given the go-ahead to move forward. P doesn't have that right to do that at this time. But our stuff is only going to be tied to, Mr. Klein's parked in your neighborhood. He shouldn't be there. License plate will read it, and that's it. So we're trying to figure out, how do we send the actual citation? Is it going to be in mail, which we would love to do that, or do we still have to get out and put it on the windshield and stuff like that? But yeah, no way will be tied to the program, and it'll be just for the program itself.
No other vehicle enforcement, vehicle code
No
enforcement.
vehicle enforcement, no nothing to that.
The other thing too is I get a lot of, not a lot, just a couple, where the parents have kids coming in the summer, and especially in the Washington Square area, where they run out of permits. And a lot of them said, you know what, I've been turned down from the city. And when I talked to a couple of people, they were saying, well, what if everybody did it? That's not the default, right? And so I would like to see an ease of exceptions, knowing that it's not going to be an entire Washington Square asking for, an extra permit or extra, even if it's 20 days, because that's 20 days out of school, right? That exception ease, and not just say, no, we can't do it because it's not in our regulations. Well, we created the regulations, meaning we can change the regulations, right? So I'd like to see that process and ease, because not everybody's doing it, and they're all one-offs. It's not the default.
So to answer your question a little more fully on that, is that part of the softwares that we're looking at for permit parking will allow them to, let's say, and I'll use this as an example: 2 cars in the garage, 2 outside, 3 kids come home. Wow, 7 cars are there. So depending on the number of permits that we end up with, let's say we'll use our current permits, 3 permits, they can actually, with the program, move the permits over to their kids while they keep their cars on their property. So there is a versatility with the virtual programs with the programs. They can virtually change it. Even the guest passes can be assigned, and they'll be assigned through a QR code. So it won't be something where they come to the city asking permission. It would just like, you need to manage your cars on site. So now, to your point, there might be, and I exaggerated with 3 kids, it might not be an exaggeration. And we're like, okay, well, I don't want to park 3 cars out there. I want to park 4 or 5. We're looking at those opportunities. We might be able to have those opportunities in the more single-family areas versus the more dense areas where we have multifamily. So the program's not going to apply one size fits all like it is now. It will be dynamic in that sense. So we are already looking at that option and everything.
Awesome. And then the last thing I'll say is, I know that the city of Tustin, they attach their parking permits to both the plates and a driver's license. And so, again, and some of the issues that I've seen in that city have been where, especially the kids come back from school, where they're not able to get their car permitted because their driver's license shows their school address or they live for their year. And so Tustin says, no, we can't give you a permit for your car, even though, hey, I'm with mom and dad during the summer, can't get a permit. So I don't understand the attachment to a driver's license, or even if that it has to be in that area.
So for safety reasons, we do that. We tie the driver's license to the permit and everything at that home and everything like that. So we don't get abuse by people maybe renting out a room or running a business or doing things like that. Now, I'm glad you're getting granular, because we are going that level. We are going where in some of the part of the program, it'll say, is it summer school? Is it, home kid, home kid from school? Is it whatever it may be? We're getting to that granular level where they can click on it and assign the permit to the kid. So we know that the driver's license isn't going to apply for that.
Right.
The only difference is we're going to need verification that it's their kid.
But let me give you another example. If you're dating somebody and you go see your girlfriend almost every single day, you can't park in that area because, right, what do you mean? So even the temporary parkings, because you don't have a license there. So that, to me, that's kind of I would think it would be attached to the actual license plate and the car, or the car is registered, not really needing to figure out who the driver is.
I will say yes. And then if somebody's visiting you, like in your scenario visiting you, they probably don't live in Santa Ana. If they did, then it wouldn't be that hard to put for them to use a guest pass. So that's what we're looking at too. The guest pass are not only going to apply to single family residents the way they do now, but they're going to apply to everyone. And it's just a matter of, can we fit them all? So if someone does come over to visit, then it'll be a guest pass that we would use for that. Now, if it's an extended stay, those are the questions that we're still working on. And that's why we're still doing the study to see what kind of density we have on our streets and everything.
Thank you so much.
Anybody have a question? Right?
Hi, Commissioner Cheney here. I have a few follow-up questions following Commissioner Alvarado. So regarding enforcement for parking, in my neighborhood, we see often during street sweeping day, to avoid ticketing, people will park on lawns, which is, not permitted in the city. But parking enforcement does not ticket those people, as they're only ticketing people who are violating the street sweeping. So when we're looking at permit parking for neighborhoods, and you're saying that you're not going to ticket for other offenses, would, in this case, parking illegally on the lawn be ignored then by parking enforcement?
So for us, if we're citing ourselves and everything like that, that's not within the scope that council is allowing us to work in, because that technically is a PD item, and how to, being on the parkway is dangerous. And I get the street sweeping thing and everything. One of the things that's been proposed is also being, for us, is to put LPRs on our street sweepers. So obviously we can cite people on the street.
Pardon? No, LPR, can you define that?
Oh, license plate readers? But we should, like the little camera that you saw on there, to put them on actual street sweepers instead of having somebody follow them and everything like that. Now, that aspect of people parking like that, or whatever else they do outside of the scope of being on the street, again, it hasn't been put under our scope. That's not to say that we can grow into that. I don't want to say I want to grow into that right now. I want to be able to manage what we can manage. I would say that we could possibly tell our street sweepers, call it in. Now, it is a policy by PD right now to help out as many people in that site, which I've said we're thankful for that and everything, but it's not in our purview for the study at this time.
Okay, I would like that though to be a consideration in the future, as it does affect pedestrian traffic in the neighborhoods, having cars parked.
Commissioner Cheney, thank you for the question. I believe cars parked on lawns is code enforcement and not PD nor public works. So code enforcement will have to come in and issue the ticketing for that. That's what the restriction is a little different. And what Frank is really considering here is for residential parking permit enforcement, and only that. We envision street sweeping enforcement would still be with PD, and your situation, or what the situation that you described, would be with code enforcement.
Yes, thank you, Nabil. But
Sure.
what I was suggesting was that if, per se, permit parking was in place in my neighborhood, I could foresee my neighbors being evasive in purchasing permits or having extra vehicles by parking, on their lawns. So I was just wondering, what measures are we going to take in those situations?
Yeah, again, it's even now residents that see this situation needs to call code enforcement for enforcement, and they will take action for that. So,
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Moving on then.
If I may add real quick,
Of course.
if it's a current problem for you and everything, you can email the team and everything like us, and we can bring it up to code enforcement currently, just to help out, alleviate that situation and everything else. That doesn't require this study to address or anything like that. We can do that for you.
Yes, I've actually already reported.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yes, I don't mind doing it for myself. I'm just thinking of the broader impact.
Correct.
But moving on, I had a question regarding how contractors would work into the permit system. I don't have parking permit. Sorry, my mic wasn't on. So I was just wondering how contractors do work within the permit system. So say For instance, someone has a landscaping service that they, subscribe to, comes once a week. That's 52 guest permits a year. That would immediately deplete, most of your 75 permits. So how do contractors fit into the permit
So
parking?
currently, the California Vehicle Code allows contractors or anybody servicing you or providing you a service at your home to come in and park in a permanent parking area. So that could be Edison, could be anyone, pool, landscape. Most of the time, most of these vehicles have a placard or something on the side that depicts their business information, everything like that. There are times that it's not. So we'll have maybe it'll be an owner that comes to work on the business, on the property, let's say. What we've told them is they can put a little placard on top of their dashboard that says, I'm the owner, I'm currently working on the piping in the house, yada, 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 and here's my phone number. And then we tell them to put the California Vehicle Code that represents. So there shouldn't be citations. There have been some, and people have complained. That's why we came up with the example of the placard to use, and then with all the information that they need, so PD can actually go there and look at it and say, are you in there right now? Because a plumber, okay, his car, you can see it. He could be in there for 2 hours working on something. But an unmarked car, you don't know who's in there. You want to make sure that we identify that you're working on something in there, whatever that may be and everything like that. But it is spelled out in the California Vehicle Code.
And how does that work as we're moving into these digital license plate readers with putting like a placard up in the windshield? Are those license plate readers going to be able to register that? Or is that going to be like, you need to file an appeal for the tickets?
So we don't have to have anything moving forward into this program, but we're trying to address it in the sense of making it easier for PD. So if, let's say, it is an unmarked car, right? The marked cars are easy. The unmarked car is driven in. There'll be places on the software that says, working on, or like currently working on this, and they'll have to list the vehicle.
So that's the resident doing the
Doing the
self-sufficient
work,
work.
exactly. So they don't have to come to the city or anything like that. Now, we're running into, which is a good question, then how do we know they're lying or not lying, right? And everything. So we're working with that perception, let's say, if they're lying. We don't want to call people liars, but if they're lying, how do we limit that? How often does it get reported back to us? This car's been here for 3 hours. Is it still doing service? Is it providing something? And do we have a robocall or something like that to reach out to the residents? Some of these softwares are very granular in that. But I think we might for now try to stick to the actual placards because they're seen on there, and there's no way to cheat that around. If you're not there, if you're sitting having dinner with somebody at 6 o'clock and PD goes out there 3 times, you're going to get cited. Especially if the number's on there and you're not calling back and everything like that. So.
Thank you. And then final question I have here is regarding the demographics for the parking study. Were demographic information, was that collected?
No.
No, it was not.
All was collected was the license plate, the picture of it, and it was geocoded to that spot.
Oh,
So
I'm sorry. I was regarding the self-reported study from the residents that we had 4,000 respondents on.
No, it was just, it was anonymous. All of them know it. If you wanted to put your name for us to reach back to you, you could do it in the comment area if you wanted a specific answer or how we were doing something. But no, it was anonymous the way everybody can report as they chose.
Okay, so we don't have any information on, what percentage of respondents were from single residents versus multifamily?
So we do, in the way the questions were referenced, obviously, what neighborhood are you from?
Mm-hmm.
So very generic to the neighborhood. And the other one was, do you live in a multifamily? Do you live in, what type of component housing do you live in? So we were able to narrow it down to the types, which is all what we're looking for. Now, none of this had anything personal income or anything like that would narrow it down to finding people or anything like that. It was mostly very generic to put them, just like we're doing now. The car's at a certain location, same thing with the respondents. Okay, where are you at and why are you responding the way you are? So we can put some of the numbers that you saw up there together on some of the respondents who are like, I can't qualify for this, so I'm not going to respond to you. So we knew, okay, there are 5 and higher units on there.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wondering because, some of the responses you were talking about, you said, were not what you were expecting. So I was wondering if the, respondents were not necessarily reflective of the demographics of the city.
The reference I was making more was in the amount of responses to a specific question, like I'll use the 1 block to 2 blocks. From all the complaints we get from everybody on the permit parking program, we saw that people are saying, I'm walking 6, 7 blocks. I'm walking this long. I'm walking a mile, yada, yada, yada. And we didn't see that on there. So it's something that where receiving the level of complaints that we're receiving, right? And the type of complaint didn't reflect into the overall survey that we're receiving when we get calls and everything like that. Were people exaggerating only 1 block or 2, or exaggerating by calling us in 7, 8 blocks? I can't tell you either way, but we take whatever they responded to as they're willing to tell us the truth on that survey and everything else like that.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Mark McLaughlin, a couple of questions I have.
Yeah.
The first one is, I'm listening to all this information being shuffled around and focus on this and focus on that. If I were to sit there and say 5 years from now, we were all in this room and we said, let's celebrate because we did a great job on this program. What did we do?
What did we do?
What did we do? I mean, how do we establish that as a great job? Because I sat on the planning commission for 6 years. One of the worst things that you could ever see was going from 1.1, car per to 0.7. And a good example of that is that we had a program over on First Street, it's a housing, it's subsidized housing, and they start out at 400, 500 parking spaces, and they needed at the end of the day 600 parking spaces. And so we stopped and said, until you have a parking plan, you need to just find a parking plan that's going to meet the goal. But at the end of the day, that unit, if you drive by there today, it's ridiculous because there's people all over the place. And the same thing goes for down the street. There's a 55 and over housing project there. And so, I'm just looking at this and saying, I got things talking about people doing things with reducing the number of cars. Is that one of the things? Because I'll tell you what, he's walked the streets from a political point of view, trying to knock on doors. I've done the same thing. At the end of the day, you knock on a door, and here's a garage that's just chock full of everything but a car.
Correct.
And the fact is that the apron is now being used by the 2 cars that were no longer in the garage, and yet there's 6 or 8 people that drive. Right around the corner from me, right across the street from me, 4 kids. They all graduated from college. They're all happy and home. They have 4 girlfriends. Now they got 2 parents. It's a 2-bedroom house. You wouldn't know it, but it's a 2-bedroom house. Right across the street, neighbor took and built another house, built an ADU behind this other house that he remodeled. There's 8 cars there. And so we're gathering that there's at least 4 per. All these things are to me, these are the nuisances that we have in the city. But how do we say we were successful? How do we do that?
So you basically frame the whole problem that we see coming from the outside influences to the city, the state, the 0.7, the ADUs, garage conversions, the over-densifying of our housing components and everything, due to rent, do whatever it may be that they're densifying. I'll answer the question this way. It's going to be a dynamic approach to get to the goal that we're looking for. I can't tell you we're going to be exactly there at 5 years, but the way we're proposing this program, it isn't, again, one size fits all, or we're stagnant. We're going to come here and tell you this is what we're doing. We're done, walking away. Part of the technologies that we're deriving a lot of information from is an ongoing thing. We're going to be doing ongoing surveys. We're going to be seeing what the impacts of, as I mentioned earlier, development projects, the new rules that are coming down. just right now, and I can't remember, it's the AB one that doesn't allow you to park 20 feet from an intersection.
Right,
We just lost 6,000 parking spaces
Right.
that way.
exactly.
So we have to get creative on how we're going to bring back those spaces, right? And each area is case by case. So creatively wise, we're pretty good about how we're going to approach this. Successfully wise is that if I can tier this gradually to a point where we're moving forward, fighting parking with all the challenges that we have, I'll tell you that that'll be a success rate if I can fit, a lot of the development that's in now into our streets with the partnerships that we're looking for and everything like that. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you exactly what's going to happen with any of the rules that are coming down from the state or federal government or anything like that, that really throw a wrench in our proceedings and everything like that. When we first started this, we thought, hey, we can do this very straightforward. And then there's been 4 assembly bills that have just killed us and literally taken a lot of parking away from us and everything like that. How we approach that is going to be a combination of involving planning, development, PD, really all the departments and everything, because we're going to need their help in making sure that we just don't put something by this zoo and it's this monstrosity and then like, hey, we need parking.
Yeah,
It's
but the zoo,
Yeah.
with all due respect, the zoo has a number of street improvements that were done between the apartments and the zoo, and that was funded by the developer.
correct.
Yeah, so I mean, developers have done some things over the years that have helped the parking situation, not hindered it, but they also have gone by the guidelines too, which are pretty straightforward as to
Yeah.
whatever the year you're in and whatever the guidelines are, they're there. There's no changing them.
Correct. And we appreciate the beautification that they do for us on our streets and everything like that. They don't necessarily add parking, but they do a lot of beautification and everything like that. And we do appreciate that. It's the actual net parking that we're looking to increase from these developments, that how do I do it outside of what the state regulations are to grow it? So would it be 5 years from now, I have a parking structure out there, and then a lot of these people that were parking on our streets are now parking in the structure, right? How do I get to that point? Obviously,
There are companies, there are parking companies in the country, because I know, kind of a nephew of mine is in their sales group, and they're selling, and the company is, large multi-million-dollar parking. And as an example, they have USC as one of their customers. And what does that mean? Well, it means that the kid drops his car off at the entry to the campus, and then it's taken to another location, and he's put on a jitney or a little bus, and he goes, these are
Correct.
These are concepts that you can benchmark a little bit and understand. Possibly this could work in this circumstance here, maybe not. Everybody wants to be close to their car, but maybe that doesn't work.
exactly. And one of the questions you saw, the multimodal approach has that component that's been talked about, like you mentioned. So we didn't list them all that we're looking at, but we've been thinking of shuttling into the downtown. So a lot of different things where we can bring people to their location to park and then bring them back to their homes, place of businesses and everything else like that. So that's part of this study and everything like that. But getting back to what's successful, I'm going to tell you now, it's going to be more a dynamic approach to it. And how do I get to the goals that we're establishing? Not just what you guys may want, but also what council wants to see to get to that goal. And how, because a lot of the infrastructure costs money. So if there are places where you can shuttle people and everything from, we'll look into those. Right now, a lot of businesses I mentioned earlier are not wanting to share their parking. Even though we can make all the allowances to protect them, put cameras, put license plate read, everything we can to make it safe, even fence them off. With that said to them, they're still not willing to do it. So we have that challenge and everything of where do we find the parking to be able to fit all the cars that we're trying to fit in. But I don't think it's that daunting, to be honest with you. It just starts with the conversation and continues, and we'll keep pushing that conversation. So to answer your question, I see the program really moving forward in 5 years from now. I can't tell it's going to be fully developed out because it takes money to get to that point. It takes growth of the program to get to that point. like to your question, are we reinvesting this money back into this program, or is it going to be moved out of the program or something like that? You know, where it takes money to get to where we need to go, all the studies we need to do, all the data collection we need to do, and whatever we may propose that requires capital to be able to implement that. So I'm optimistic because of all that we're seeing that we can accommodate. It's just there's going to be a little bit of pain everywhere to be able to do that and everything like that. So, yeah, 5 years from now, we'll sit here and talk about it. I think we'll have a successful program going forward that's including all the people that council wants us to include. We're not going to be done by 5 years. No, I mean, this program will be dynamic and ongoing. It'll take a life of its own. I'll be gone, other people be gone, but it'll be set in place where whoever comes in can change it up, can do whatever council wants differently. It won't be set just in a resolution and documented that way and codified. It just can't be, because things change around us all the time. I mean, the last 2 years, the ADUs, garage conversions, this new AB bill that went through, we didn't anticipate those. They were nowhere anticipated. So as it goes down, if nothing changes, yeah, we'll be able to meet some really good goals in 5 years. But as it keeps morphing, we'll morph with whatever's coming down the pike. So that's probably the best answer I give you without, cutting my own head off and telling you this is where we'll be at. But I definitely believe we'll have a successful program in 5 years. I think in the next couple of years, we'll have a successful program. So,
Commissioner McLaughlin, can we go to slide 13, please? So we have the recommended categories, and I would call these the parameters of success. If we are able to check some of these boxes that we're talking about, for example, update the policies, streamline management of the program, bring in technology the first year, improve enforcement. We can't create curb space in the city. The streets are the streets. And so, however, by improving on the technology, and like we've described here, would be a metric and measure of success for this program. Again, we can also go into the data-driven decisions. It's dynamic. We'll probably be able to figure out how many residential permits that we are selling and how many spaces available, so we can dynamically manage the inventory of sidewalk space for parking in residential districts. So those are the type of measurements that we'll be looking at. Again, it won't be a perfect, but with the restrictions and what you've mentioned about zoning and state requirements for parking, we're very limited. I can't create space in the sidewalks. However, like we've mentioned earlier, we would, as part of this program, is try to work with the school district, our own park systems and businesses, and require some of the high density apartment complexes to install lifts and do their part. And like you mentioned, parking management programs or programs that can help or assist the high density developments to manage parking. Those are the kind of measurements that we'll be looking at have we succeeded? I think if we touch on some of these and we accomplish some of them, I would say that would be a successful program going forward.
Okay.
Yeah, last comment, and this reminded me of when I met residents specifically in my area of the Artisa Pilar, south of 5th, between Rate and Bristol, all the way to Flower, actually. The neighbors themselves know that there are residential neighbors either selling cars or working, out of body, out of the backyard. And so I was hoping maybe if that can be a question addressed in one of these phases, say, do you have a neighbor? Do you see that? Because that affects your program, right? I'm not saying that we should report every business when you run out of the house, but this problem that we have, especially in my neighborhood, is directly affects you guys in this parking study that we're doing.
Correct. the nice thing about with the LPRs is that we could actually gather that data. Now, I'll caveat that with that council will have to allow us to do that first. Because right now they don't want us reporting on anything other than permit parking. If it is going to, let's say, if it does affect us while we're doing the study and we can show that X amount of cars are out there that don't even belong there or they're dilapidated or anything like cars that have no license plate, we'll mark them with just a very generic plate that we scan. So if we see a lot of those, then is that something that we'll report out to council? But is that something council will allow us to forward to the police department? Because dilapidated vehicles, cars that are being worked on, should not be on our streets, should be on site and everything like that. And it's easier said than obviously managed and done. So, but that is part of the program that we're looking at to see what the latitudes we can have to send it back. You know, that would be back to the commissioner's question about people on, you know, on the parkways, right? Would they give us a latitude to report that back to PD? So that's something we are looking at from just a statistical standpoint. And if that does affect us 15, 20%, and I'm exaggerating on the number, then that might be something that's plausible to sit there and ask for help from the council, say, allow us to do this, because then we can open up more parking for the residency. Yes.
How much park, go ahead, Sweet.
Sorry, I have a question. Commissioner Baeza, I know when you were going through your presentation, you mentioned how we can give more parking if there is no like physical parking spaces available. And I was wondering, based on this slide, there is on point H, encourage alternative transportation. Are you able to provide any recommendations to improve public transportation, or can you discuss more on how you're encouraging alternative transportation?
Both, because we want to encourage obviously people to be multimodal and everything else like that. And that's one of the biggest drives that happens outside our city. Actually is already very multimodal, if you will, in the sense that our busing system is the biggest one in the whole county to begin with. So our people are already using that and everything. It's just the developments are not. So we are trying to work with planning and building, and how do we get them to help us provide that type of transportation so we can open up parking in the areas. So that is an effort that we have going forward and everything like. It's not something we're just putting aside and let somebody else deal with it. And to my earlier statement, this is a dynamic process. We're bringing everybody in every day, every week, every month, every year to achieve that goal and everything like that. The second part of your question was what?
It was, I guess it's more of a comment at this point. I know you also mentioned the brainstorming of a parking structure in the zoo. Personally, a way to measure if this program was successful or not, I would not like to see a parking structure at the zoo. I think if it was something alternative to like a bus stop, I think that would be more cost effective. It would improve the walkability in the city, and it would also provide a quicker route for the use of public transportation, especially in that area where the zoo is. I don't think there is a bus stop like around those blocks. I know there's one on First, I believe, or all the way on McFadden. So if there could be some recommendation through this survey that you can make to improve public transportation, I think that would be really
Okay, we'll take that under comment, because I know some of the, like I mentioned earlier, some of the shuttling I mentioned could be bus, could be different type of vehicles, depending on where we have the, I'll say the hub for that area. I mentioned the zoo because it's a perfect example of about 3,700 units in the area, not just where near the zoo, but if you go down Lion Street, you have all those apartment complexes there. So that's a lot of homes that need parking and everything like that. So, and there's some distance away. So if we isolate that parking structure, let's say at night for, like you're mentioning, the residents, how do we establish that a shuttle system? What is that going to cost? You know, at what times do we run it? Those things, the studies allowing us to do that kind of granularity on picking up that information. So it has been discussed, but not necessarily having like a hub for, let's say, buses. It's more like a destination for pickup, and then you bring them back to wherever they need to go and everything. Being more part of a route than it would be a self-sustaining route one option. The other one is just a self-sustaining route for only the neighbors in that area. Now, council will have to tell us it's okay to do that, especially with the large of an investment. How far do we go out to capture as much people as we can to benefit from that investment? So, but thank you for that comment. We are looking at it, but I like the way you mentioned having a route bus, because we don't have a bus route over there right now as we speak.
Oh, thank you.
But now in the zoo area today, there's a Caltrans parking.
They park north of the zoo, right?
They park right diagonally across from the new apartments.
Okay, I've seen them. Yeah, I've seen them park.
Diagonally,
Yeah. So the,
Caltrans, yeah,
Yeah,
so I
the
mean, and drive past there, and that's another example. I've never seen cars in there, and when I have seen cars in there, which is usually Saturday and Sundays, it may be 10 out of 75 cars. So that's a perfect, I think, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I think it's a good idea of why we're not doing something like that with our partners that are supposed to be helping us out. You know, there's where I think there's some sense and sensibility to the whole thing. I think the other thing is that I didn't rationalize it the first time, but the second time around, autonomous vehicles. When you talk about giving up parking, that's one of the things that's happening. And I think one of the big areas that's happening in right now is San Francisco. I mean, you can go and you can sit there in a corner and up comes this little autonomous car that says, you know, your name, and it says, get in, and you get in, and next thing you know, you're taking off to your destination. Now, there's a lot of people doing it just for the shits and grins of the whole thing. But at the same time, it is practical. And I mean, if you want to put yourself on the map to say you've really thought this one through and here's what your solution is, that could be an amazing situation for, you know, what we're trying to do with this parking strategy. I mean, that's...
No, and I appreciate that input. I know we've reached out to Caltrans, right? And they've never said no, but they haven't expressed terrible interest in us parking on their properties and everything else like that, unless it's like isolated to like let's say Discovery Science Center. It's an isolated area, no big deal. We can use that and everything like that. But you're right. It's that little area hasn't come up in our conversations at this point. Maybe that's the area we can use some of the autonomous vehicles there too, combine it or something like that. We haven't looked at that portion of it yet, only because in the example you gave in San Francisco, they have to have a pretty big area where to house those vehicles overnight. They don't run 24/7.
No.
So that's where where do we place these? Where do we give them a yard to be at? And what are the best hours to be able to help people to the point I made earlier? Do we use those vehicles, just thinking out loud, to pick people up and drop them off from the locations that they've been, you know, assigned to park and then to their apartments?
Well, I mean, ultimately, it could be an offshoot of Uber or Lyft or something like that.
Yeah.
So you got the workforce that's there today. You just, instead of driving your own car, you're driving an autonomous. Well, you don't have to drive an autonomous car. My bad. You know, it doesn't have a person in there. It's just you can shut it off at 12 o'clock in a garage, and that's it. It's done.
No, we could. Thank you for the comments. We'll put that in there, and I'll make sure we look in and have at least a logistical comment back to you why we can or can't do that potentially, and what would it take to get to that point. So thank you for that.
Okay. Any other questions, comments for everybody?
Commissioners, thank you for your time. I do appreciate it. And please, the
Thanks,
QR
Francisco.
code, reach out to us if you need any other questions answered.
Thank you, Frank.
Okay. Moving on to comments and updates from staff.
I don't have any comments. Thank you.
You're speechless. Come on.
One update, unfortunately, that this year our Public Works family event will not take place this year due to a loss of a key individual in our Public Works agency. I'm hoping to bring it back next year. That's my update. However, the 5K will proceed on the same day in the morning of that Tuesday. I'm sorry. Our Saturday, the 22nd? May 17th, the 5K will continue, but the Public Works event will not. Sorry for
Okay.
that.
Any other comments from staff? No? Hearing none, okay. Comments from commissioners?
Commissioner Wesa, I have a question regarding the 5K. I'm really excited to see that it's happening this year. I know in the past it's been free. I saw there was a cost this year. My only concern for the residents of Santa Ana that are participating is that if the cost will increase in the incoming years, or if we can put an effort to go back to having it free. I know there's a cost for the 10K, which I understand it's longer, but if we could at least make an effort to continue having the 5K free for residents, I think that would be great.
Thank you, Commissioner Beaza. I will share this information with Director of Parks and Recreation Services, Hawk Scott. And thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments? Okay. Good enough, thank you. With regards to moving on, if there are any future agenda items that we'd like to see coming from Public Works? Anybody have any in particular? Okay, I have one little one, but it's something that I asked about probably about 6 months to a year ago, and that is that along the streets that the trees have been cut down, or well, basically cut down because it had one problem or another. As it decomposes, it sinks. And I know I brought this up at a meeting, like I said, within the last 6 or 12 months. And my neighbor, fell in the hole and he ended up having to put the dirt in there for themselves. And we've got a number of locations along Riverside Drive that have the same problem. And I'm only looking at this from the standpoint, it's a liability that the city is taking because that's their responsibility. And it's been there. It's not something new. It's been there for at least 20 or 30 years, depending upon what tree you're talking about. Not all the trees have that problem, but some of them do have that problem. And so I'd like to have somebody take a look at, some of the locations and see what needs to be done. If anything, just a couple of shovelfuls of dirt would be the answer to most of the problems.
Will do, Commissioner, for sure. I'll have our tree department take a drive on Riverside Drive and
But you got to
take
get
care
out
of
of the
it.
car.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You can't look at the thing from the street. It's just
For sure.
It's just a little down like that, but it gets dangerous with people walking.
Will do.
Okay. All right, moving on to meeting adjournment. The next regular ETAC meeting is scheduled for 4 p.m. on April 9th, 2025. The ETAC meeting of March 11th, 2025 is adjourned at 5:28.
Thank you.
Thank you.
April 8th, right?
What's that?